Hi,
Hello.
I'm Liam. And,
Liam, okay.
So, could you state your name, your date of birth, and branch of service?
So my name is Mitchell Sandoval. I was born November the 29th, 1965, and I was in the United States Navy on board the USS Nashville, which is an LPD.
What was the highest rank you attained?
I was promoted to Petty Officer 3rd Class. From the time I went in as a fireman recruit, and then you go up to fireman apprentice, then fireman, then I went up to Petty Officer 3rd Class.
So what were the early days of your service like training and?
Started out with boot camp, obviously. 13 weeks of boot camp down in San Diego, longest bus ride in my life. It was pretty. I went in at 17 years old, and so my parents had to sign a waiver to allow me to go in at 17. I graduated at 17 years old, so immediately after graduation, I graduated in June. In August, I was on my way to boot camp.
So how did you go into the military? Were you drafted? Did you enlist?
So I was it's kind of a different situation in my case. I enlisted. Like I was telling you, that my parents had to sign a waiver for me to go in at the age of 17. But I was, when I was a young man, I was a victim of the streets, right? And so I was getting in a lot of trouble with the law. And the reason I ended up going into the military was because I was given a choice: get in trouble or go to the service. And this was from a judge. And so at that time I thought, well, I don't want my mom crying and upset, because if I go to jail, she's not going to be happy with me, and that's just going to bring hardship on the family. So I opted to go to the military. And so a few weeks after that, I had to go back with my paperwork showing them that I was going to enlist, and that's how I ended up in the military. Best decision I ever made in my life. I will tell you that, hands down.
So what was the most vivid memory of your time in training or in school? What was the best?
Well, boot camp was tough. And what I can recall is that what really sticks in my mind even to this day is that when you're in boot camp, you become part of a group of people that from all walks of life, all over the United States, actually from the Philippines as well. I mean, there's people from different countries that also, are part of the military. And to see everybody come in that you have no idea, no clue of their background, their culture, or anything about them, and you become this one cohesive team. That's what boot camp does for you. It makes you all think and act and behave the same way. And to me, that was amazing to see that we were able to forge into one, I want to use the word chain. We're all links of that chain. And it was pretty interesting. It was neat to see. And then graduation obviously was a big hurdle to overcome. Because some people didn't make it. Some people washed out. So that was my training part of it.
What was your first assignment after basic training?
I went to a school for seamanship, and that was about 8 weeks long. I want to say a month, maybe 2 months. And then I got my orders to get deployed to the USS Nashville, and that's where I ended up going over to Norfolk, Virginia. That's where it was stationed at.
What was the hardest part of your training?
Are you talking boot camp, or are you talking everything?
Everything.
I don't know if anything was really hard. They mentally prepare you, if that makes sense. So they push you to limits that you didn't think you can do, and you would do them. how you did them, it just happens. And I'll give you an example. You would get up at 3 o'clock in the morning, go have breakfast, line up out in front of a classroom and sit there or stand there at ease for like 2 hours. And then sun comes up, then the instructor would show up and you'd go into a classroom and then you'd sit down and do some studying. They had some classes you had to go to while you were in boot camp. And so you would just be mentally like, why are we standing here for 2 hours? You know, or why are we doing this? And there was a lot of that kind of stuff that was put into you to make you just all become part of a deal. I mean, if I had to say, it was kind of like just conditioning your mind to think the way they wanted you to think. And so pretty soon you knew, okay, we're going to go to class today. Class starts at 8, but we're going to be 6 o'clock in the morning. We're going to be there waiting. And so, you know, stuff like that. It was more of a mental challenge, I think, than anything else, because you can get in shape for anything else. You know, physically you can get in shape for whatever. Mentally, that's the thing they're trying to condition in you. At least that's what I thought.
What was the hardest part of the military lifestyle for you to adapt to, or why do you think it was?
Well, so at 17, I'm considering, some of you are probably 17 years old. Okay, so just imagine yourself being flown across the United States, put on a ship, and then you're in an environment where you're with grown men. Okay, and there was no females on board ship at that time that I was in there, so it was all a male environment. And so I went in 1983, and so it was 20 years removed from the civil rights movement, pretty much. Okay, and growing up in California, growing up in a little small town of Porterville, I had friends from all different ethnicities. When I got to Norfolk, Virginia, I realized the rest of the world is not Porterville, and I was thrown into some pretty ugly situations dealing with racism. There was a lot of people that still have those feelings, those sentiments towards people that weren't the same race, and that was the biggest thing that I was like, wow. I didn't know people thought like I thought we all just would be friends, and that wasn't the case. And so that was the hardest thing for me to get over when I first arrived to the station, my duty station. And that probably long lasting with me. That stuck with me forever. I'll never forget the situations that I had to endure while I was in there during that time. And you think Navy, we're all in the same team. That was an eye opener. But nothing I couldn't take care of even at the age of 17. Yeah. So, Porterville taught me well. Yeah.
So where did you serve again, and what are your recollections of your experience there, like the highlights?
So, I had a lot of anxiety when I knew I was going to a ship. Okay, I was like, oh man, I'm gonna be on the ocean. Heck, we never even went to the ocean. My parents never took us to Pismo. That was never been there, right? Get on a boat out in the middle of Norfolk, Virginia, and going, okay, how is this going to be on the sea? Is the boat going to sink? Is blah blah blah. It was probably something that was I want to say it was pretty soothing. I mean, the tranquility of the ocean, and then the power of the ocean was just amazing to me. But Navy life, sailor life, out on the wild blue was amazing. The ship was my home, and so you become accustomed to it. You sleep, you eat, you work. Everything you do, you take day off on the ship. And so that was just like it was like a little small town that you lived on. You had a kitchen, you had a barbershop, you had the doctor's office, you had the laundry room, it was a gym, you had your dorm. So everything was there. It had a ship store. Yeah, so that was probably my most memorable of my time in the service was that I was real fearful of the ocean. But then I realized that, ships are built tough. Yeah, so you weather a lot of storms, really. literally. So.
Yeah. So were you in a combat support or combat service support role?
No, so the ship I was on was called an LPD. It stood for Landing Platform Dock, and it was considered what we would call the Gator Navy. Okay, we used to say the real Navy was destroyers, frigates, aircraft carriers, cruisers. That was the real Navy. We were the Gator Navy. We were part of an amphibious assault team group. So the ship I was on, if you would, I would compare it to a pickup truck, 4x4, heavy duty. Let's go mudding, right, type of truck. Because this ship I was on, we had a flight deck. We had a well deck, which means it had a tailgate on it that would lower down, and we would flood the inside of the ship underwater. And inside the well, we called it a well deck. We had boats that were tied inside there, tanks, boats, hovercraft, because we would carry Marines with us when we would deploy. And the main goal of that ship was to get the Marines to the beach during wartime. So you all seen the World War II movies where you see them coming into Normandy and they drop the ramp. Well, we had those boats as well on the ship. And so we would flood the inside of the well deck with water, and then those boats would float. We'd unhook them, and then they would drive out, and then they would go. And some of the tanks that we had carried Marines in them, like 10 or 15 inside the back, and they would take them into the beach. And so it was all designed for an amphibious assault on a beach landing, and that's what it was. It was a one-way boat ship. You know, it wasn't designed to get in there and you'd be able to get away. It was designed to get in there, and if you got that done, you completed your mission. They never expected you to be anything more than doing that. So that was mainly what our goal was. That was the primary task of our ship. And we had a flight deck that just, you could land planes, but it was mainly helicopters because it wasn't a full flight deck, and you'll see in the picture. But we used to get the British AV-8, the Harrier jets, and I don't know if you're familiar with them, but they would come in and they would hover. They were jets. They would come in and then they would drop their exhaust ports, and then they would come down like a helicopter, and they would land. And then when they took off, the same thing. They would go up, they would switch up, and then take off. It was amazing. It was pretty cool to see. Yeah, it was quite a sight, you know. So, and that was the main goal of the ship. And then we carried a Navy SEAL team on board. We carried Marines. We carried the Ranger unit. We carried Navy SEALs. We carried all their support people on the ship. And so the goal was to be ready to do anything that we needed, and we did. We did quite a bit of stuff. Even though I wasn't in during wartime, in the early 80s, that's when all the terrorism stuff was starting to happen. They were starting to sabotage ships and do things like that. And so I had went in right after they had bombed the embassy in Beirut, Lebanon. And so that was still fresh in everybody's mind. And so when we went off for what we called a med cruise, was a Mediterranean deployment. You go in and you do all this stuff. They have scheduled ports that you go to. TWA plane got hijacked with some American contractors and soldiers on board, and we were at the end of our deployment. We were getting ready to come back out and head back to the States, and we had made one final stop at the Rock of Gibraltar. I don't know if you guys are all familiar with the Rock of Gibraltar. They used to sell insurance there, right, on commercial on TV. And so we had just gone off. We did a Liberty port there for a couple days, and then we were going to head out back to the States. And then that happened. And so we deployed. They recalled the pennant, which is a black pennant, telling everybody to get back to the ship. All of the military police and shore patrol were in the town getting everybody to get back. The boat's leaving in 20 minutes. And so at that time, I remember myself and a couple of shipmates sitting at a bar, getting ready to toss back a cold one, you know. And next thing you know, we're running back to the boat. We got on board, took off. 2 days, there's sailors I got left behind. The ones that didn't make it. And so for 2 days, we sailed out back towards the middle of the Mediterranean. And, you know, we didn't know what was going on because, you know, media wasn't like it is today. And so We ended up, after the second day, the ship's captain came on board and then told us what was going on, and that we were heading to where this plane was going. And so we ended up following it everywhere because we had this Navy SEAL team on board and the Marines. And so we went back into the Mediterranean, and we ended up, after it was all said and done, we ended up in back off the coast of Beirut. And at that time, we were doing what they call water hours, because the gun systems that we had on the ship were cooled by fresh water. So a Navy ship makes its own water, its own drinking water, and its own potable water. And so that water was going to be used to cool the guns down, because we had some defense systems that would shoot so many bullets so fast that the barrels would get so hot. So they had to have water cooling to keep them from melting. And so they rationed us 2 water hours. And so we went 45 days with no showers. During the whole time we were off the coast of Beirut. You could get up in the morning, brush your teeth, go to the restroom, you could wash your face, but you couldn't, what we'd call a bird bath. You couldn't take no bird bath. And then they would shut the water off. And then they would do it again at noon, and then again at supper time, so you could wash up. But by no means could you get into the shower. They had guards at every berthing area, making sure if you did, you got in trouble. It was big. It was a big deal. So when that finally got lifted after 45 days, oh man, a shower was the best thing since time. It was the greatest. And so, but that was one of the deals that we were involved in when I was on board. Another situation we had was the Space Shuttle Challenger. You guys are I know you guys weren't born yet, but it blew up. And it's kind of, it was an historical flight kind of deal, because it was the first female teacher that was going to go into space. And I remember I sat down at lunch, and we were watching on closed circuit TV, and we watched it go up, and then we watched it explode, and everybody was like, what? And a couple minutes later, the alarm came over the intercom, and the captain said, we're heading that way, we're going to go over there and pick up parts. Because once again, we had the Navy SEAL team who are divers, and so they went over to help do the recovery of all the pieces that fell into the ocean. And at that time, we were just coming out of, we were coming back, I think, from Cuba, from outside of Guantanamo Bay. And so you guys heard of Guantanamo Bay, right? That's where they kept a lot of the terrorists during this whole ISIS thing. And so over there, all the Navy ships, when they get refurbished or get something new put on them, they have to go to Guantanamo Bay, everybody that's on the East Coast, to pass all of their fire sea readiness training, making sure everything works. And they run you through a bunch of tests before you can actually get back into service. And we had just completed that, and we were coming out of there. So we got deployed over to go pick up parts from the space shuttle. Yeah, it was a pretty historical moment, you know, looking back at it now. It's like, wow, I was involved in that too. So, yeah, that was some of the stuff that during my tenure in there.
That's a lot.
Yeah.
Do you recall the day your service ended and where you were?
Yes. So I was. We had finished that situation. We were coming back, and I remember we were going to get ready to get deployed again. And so right before you get out of the military, when your time's up, and we call it a hitch. My hitch was up, right? Rope around the pole's a hitch. So my hitch was up, and I was up for shore duty. And so I had to do like a couple more months, and then I'll be available for my shore duty, which meant I would have been on base somewhere. And so I didn't really want to go on shore duty, so I was willing to waiver my time on shore duty to go back out at sea again, because I really enjoyed it after that point. But I didn't want to be on the East Coast no more. I wanted to get back to the West Coast. So right before you get done to get out, you meet with a career counselor who's on board the ship, and you talk about re-enlisting, what are your options. And so he offered me a ship out of back in Norfolk, any ship I wanted. And I was like, I don't want to be in Norfolk. I want to be on the West Coast, so I could go home, you know. It was hard over there because it was hard to fly across, come back. It was just was ready to come back to the West Coast. Had they offered me that or given me a ship on this side, I would have stayed in and re-enlisted. But because they didn't, I opted to get out. So the last day when that happened, I remember that they were like, okay, we're going to get deployed. We're going back in for another 7 months. If you go with us and your time runs out while you're over there, you're stuck there till the end of the deployment. So we'll let you get out a month early before we go back in, and we'll give you an early out. And so that's what I did. I said, okay, yeah, no, I don't want to go get caught back over there again. So where do I sign? And so I got out. And then I ended up coming back, flying into LAX, then into Bakersfield, and then I got picked up by my sister, and my aunt picked me up. My best friend. Yeah, that was a good day. Oh, it was a good day.
So how'd you readjust to like normal life, like civilian life?
It was tough.
Yeah.
It was tough because the military, you know, they condition you a certain way. And then to come back out, obviously, you know, you want to catch up with your friends and all that kind of stuff. But then you're also subjected to everything else that's going on around here. And the most disappointing thing to me was that here I was a veteran now. I was out of the military, and I could not find a job. It was so frustrating to the point where, you know, I thought about, all right, well, I'm going to go back in, you know, because I couldn't find no work. And it was right towards the end of the 80s, and it was kind of like, all right, what do I do? You know, I can't live with my parents forever. You know, I got to get my own place, but I got to get a job. I had money saved from when I was in the service, but I knew that wasn't going to last. And so I ended up finally, a friend of mine, believe it or not, through one of the job placement programs, got me a job for like 3 months. And I worked my butt off, and it was for the Forest Service. And I worked my butt off for those 3 months, and they said, hey, you know, do you want to keep working for us even when the program ends? I'm like, yes. And so that worked out pretty good for a while. It ended up being just a seasonal kind of work. And then they were going to hire me full time. And then there was some government program that came through, and they were like, Mitch, we're sorry, but we can't hire you full time. We can keep you part time. We can put you in another department, but it's going to have to keep being seasonal. And so I was like, whatever. I need to have money. I need to take care of, you know, things that I need to take care of. And so I did. And then the fire department. Back then, all the jobs that you could get in town were in the newspaper under jobs. And so there was one for the firefighter position. And so when you go through boot camp in the Navy, you go through firefighting school. All right, so because when you're on board a ship, you're going to have to fight that fire. So I was part of a firefighting team on the ship as well, one of my duties. And so, all right, I filled it out, and I got a thank you but no thank you letter saying you don't qualify. You got to have the fire academy to be a full-time firefighter with us, but you can be a reserve if you want to come and take the test for reserve. And so I was like, all right. So I went and took the test. It was like 20 minutes. And then a couple weeks later, I got a phone call, and then I was a reserve. So I never really thought about being a fireman. At that time it was fireman. Now it's firefighter, the politically correct way to say it. But that wasn't my ambition, right? But when they hired me as a reserve, I figured, okay, it'd keep my parents happy, and it'd be good for me. And the second I got on the fire engine and they turned on the lights and siren and I went on a call, I was hooked. I was like, this is what I want to do for the rest of my life. And so I worked hard. I went back to college. I went through the fire academy, went through the MT program. Then I went back to get my degree. And then a year after I was hired as a reserve, they built the fire station number 2, which is over here on Newcomb. And I was one of 3 that got selected for a position. And I've been there ever since. November 1st will be, I'll start my 30th year. 31st year, I had a year with reserves. So I had 29 years full-time with them, 1 year reserves, and now I'm going to start my 30th full-time with them. So yeah, it's been a blessing. So, yeah.
In the end, how did your military service experiences, like, affect and, like, shape your life? How do you think?
Oh, so, I don't know if you guys play football or not, or if you ever belong to a team or something where when it's all over and it's done, and you're no longer part of that team, you have that bond with your teammates. The military is kind of like that. It's like anybody that served time in the military is a brother to me. And I treat them with the utmost respect, young or old, because I think being patriotic goes along. It's not for everybody, okay? Don't get me wrong. It's not for everybody. It's not going to go through the military. All of us that went in through the military know that some that were, that had to go, that were drafted, those that are enlisted, we all carry a bond of being patriotic to this country. And we realize, like me, I realize that maybe my sacrifice at the time that I was in may not mean much to many people, but I know that without that sacrifice that I took or did, and all the others before me, allow us to be sitting here today and having this conversation. It allows us to be able to go down there to McDonald's and get a Happy Meal, or to go to a Friday night football game, because our sacrifices is part of keeping this country free. And to me, that bond that we all hold, some don't look at the military in the same light that I do. Those that were in Vietnam, those that were, they all have their different opinions of what the military is, but we all carry the same thing, is that we all served and sacrificed for this country, whether it was during wartime or not. And so it takes all of us to keep the machine going, if you will, for freedom. You guys see, you guys are right here, you see the signs of protesters. Without freedom, you wouldn't be able to do that. You just watch other countries, people are getting killed for doing that same stuff. So for me, there's a bond. I hold any other veteran dear to my heart, and I think they're special, because the military it's a giving organization. You have to give. You're not going to get nothing out of it. You're making the ultimate sacrifice, right? You can be killed, and a lot of people have died because of that. So, that's my take on the military and the bondage. So.
What are some, like, major life lessons that you got from the service?
I'm thankful for every day that I wake up. The blessings that I get that I've had it happen to me, and those that I'm still going to get. To be able to sit in front of you guys today and tell you these stories, it's a blessing to me, because a lot of people don't get that opportunity. And so life lessons is that there's, you can look at life like this. You can be an invert, right? Introvert. Not share anything, be secluded, be in your little shell, or you can be an extrovert like I am. I'm an extrovert. I love to talk. I like to make people laugh. I enjoy helping people. Right now I'm in the giving business, And so I think you make the best of your life the way you can. And so for me, it's giving and sharing. And so I've done community service. So the life lessons that I've learned from the military is that to be thankful and grateful, and I'm humble for what I have. Okay, I don't take anything for granted, right? Fancy stuff doesn't float my boat. I don't care about all that stuff. What I care about is having the quality of life. I care about being able to go to the movies, or to watch TV in my backyard outside on the big screen. Those are things that are important to me in life. To be able to go somewhere and see something beautiful, to have a conversation, to me that's what's important. So the life lessons that I've learned is that we're here for a short time. We don't know when that time's going to end for us, and I want to make the best out of it. And so I try to have full fulfillment in every day that I wake up. I don't even like to take naps because I think I'm going to miss something. I don't want to miss nothing, because when it's over, and so I want to enjoy every minute of it.
So, is there anything a message you'd like to leave for future generations, for people like us that will see this video and hear your experiences?
If you want to take one thing away, is that from this video, from this conversation, is this: how will people remember you when you're gone? Because the only thing that you leave left in this world is your name. And how will people remember your name? How will you be remembered by? What's going to be your contribution to this society, your community, to the world? You know, even though we're not all going to be politicians, we're not all going to be CEOs, all that, you still have a sphere of influence in the people that are surrounding you. And you can either make it good or you can make it bad. So how do you want to be remembered? And that's how I would want people to see this at the end of this, say, yeah, because all I have is my name. You know, today after we leave here, you're going to remember me because of my name and this conversation we had. And hopefully you'll take from it what you can and go with it, you know, because as you become adults, people are going to depend on you for things, right? And so how do you want to be remembered? So respect is a big thing when it comes to family. At some point, some time in your life, you will be the head of your family. And how would your siblings, children, grandchildren remember you? And just think about that. You know, how do you want, what legacy do you want to leave behind? So, yeah.
Okay, so
Keep going, man. I got all kinds of answers.
we have something to show you, actually.
Okay.
And let's get that right now.
There are messages and cards from Doyle in elementary. They wanted to make you.
From John J. Doyle?
Doyle, yeah. Doyle.
That was my alma mater. I went to John J. Doyle.
Really?
Yes.
Wow.
Yep. I went to John J. Doyle. Oh, thank you. This is from the students there? Oh, great. Yeah. I was actually in the 6th grade, I was the safety commissioner. Boy, they hated me because no running, ticket, no this, ticket. Where you going? You got a hall pass? No ticket. But I just continued to, you know, I always was a helper, even since I was little, you know, and then life after the military kind of molded me too as I got into the boxing business. I owned a boxing gym for 20 years. I started with the PAL, the Police Activity League program, and I started taking kids off the streets. And it's because growing up, I grew up in a bad neighborhood, and my parents did the best they could with me. But we were poor. We're migrants. They worked in the fields, and the streets raised me as a youngster. So when I got out of the service and I got a job in the fire department, I was like, there's kids just like me out there today. So I opened up a boxing program, not for a couple of reasons. One, if you got in trouble for fighting, or if you were fighting in school or fighting in the street, you get in trouble. Well, if that's what you're doing and you can do it in a boxing ring and win a trophy, I feel that's a reward. And it could lead you to somewhere. There were scholarships for that also. I decided to open up a boxing gym and get kids involved because I used to like to do this and I would get in trouble. And so when I was in the military, I boxed a little bit. And growing up as a kid, I boxed a little bit. And then I became, you know, the streets captured my heart, if you will, because that happens. And that leads nothing to bad times. And so when I got out of the military, I was like, I'm going to help those that are in those same situations and even worse situations. So I opened up a boxing gym. Well, that all led to bigger and better things for me. I ended up having a very successful club. I had a lot of boxers. I had some champions and amateur kids. And then I was approached by some professionals. Hey, will you help me learn how to box? I need this skill. I'm doing this, doing that. So I ended up becoming involved with some professionals in the mixed martial arts as a boxing coach. And so I had a UFC fighter that I trained for 7 years. I had a couple of Bellator fighters that I trained for several years, and a couple of professional boxers. And so I started traveling the world in this circle. And so I was still working in the fire department.
still am. And then at night, I'd open up my gym and work with the professional circuit. And pretty soon, I was never home. And so, but I got to travel the world, and I've been involved in some pretty big events and know a lot of people. And I've been blessed, you know, because it's like I was telling you, I'm in the giving business, you know. And so, if I can help somebody out down the road, I'm gonna help you, you know, because it takes people like this to put a smile on people's face. Sometimes we're always, you know, it's easy to be upset. You know, it's hard. We're living in a hard time right now. So I'll just say that. Yeah.
We definitely need more people like you.
Yeah. Well, I appreciate that, and you know, and so all my kids are all in the education business as well. They're adults now, but they're all into working for the schools or helping. My daughter works in a hospital, so I tell my kids, you know, you too have that. You have to carry that torch. You know, help people. You know, because people need help sometimes. So, good deal.
We're at 36 minutes. I think we're good.
Yeah.
Thank you so
Well,
much.
no, thank you guys.
Thank you so much.
No, thank you guys for inviting me. This is a pleasure.
It was a pleasure to learn about
Yeah.
you and your experiences and how amazing of a person you are.
You know, there's you know, people tell me, hey, why don't you write a book of your life? And I'm like, well, because there's a lot of bad things in my book. But I'm like, you know, even my kids, you know, they're grown up, and they're like, Dad, you should probably put all your memoirs together, man, because there's some
Should,
stories that you can share with people. And I was like, well, I don't really know if I want to share everything in my life, but yeah, it's gone from there to here, and so I never take a day for granted.
Yeah.
I mean, God's blessed me with the ability to have probably the best job in the world.
Yeah.
I mean, I'm second from the top in the department. I've lived this long.
Mm-hmm.
I remember when I was a youngster, like 25, 26 years old, I used to give the old guys at the station a bunch of heck, right?
Mm-hmm.
And, oh, you old man, you're slow. Man, we got to wait for you to get on the truck, hurry up. And finally, one of them said to me, hey, you know, I made it this long. You don't know if you're going to. You know, and it stuck with me. I'm like, oh, he's right. You know, and then I started working, you know, while working there, a couple of the guys that I worked with passed away. One at 40 years old, another one at 50 something. And I'm thinking, boy, this guy, you know, he's right. You just don't know. And so, you know, I quit doing that kind of teasing to him, you know, and started thinking, I want to get to your age at least, you know. So firefighting, they give you 7 years after retirement is usually how long do you last before you pass away. And that's still young, but the job's stressful, you know. And so there's a lot to it. There's statistics that show you don't live past 7 years after you have a fire career. So that's going to be kind of worrying. I don't think I'm going to quit. I think I'm going to just keep working. So the 7 years never comes, right? But yeah, I mean, that's all I know is fire.
Yeah.
Fire and helping people, you know, being involved in the community.
That's great.
So, and that's real important.
Yeah.
And so,
Well, thank you so
Oh,
much.
no.
Thank you so much.